in my hip. If you're not a doctor and don't know what that means, here's how it was explained to me. Your hip socket is a ball in the socket joint, right? And I didn't know it, but there's a lining in the socket to make sure everything runs smoothly on that hip. And I ended up on the ball of my hip had a little piece of bone sticking up. And it finally worked its way through and tore a rip in that lining of the socket. I had no idea it happened. I just knew that my hip hurt. And I just bucked up and went through the pain, and it just started hurting more and more and more until weeks later I could hardly walk. I mean, if I park my car in the lot there and think about walking all the way here, just be like, I don't think I can make it. And so finally, stubborn me finally went to the doctor, and the doctor looked at it and said, you have a torn labrum. You need surgery. We're going to go in there. We're going to stitch that tear back up. We're going to file that bone down so it doesn't tear again. Fine. I'm not worried about surgeries. I've had about a dozen of them in my life, so it doesn't make me anxious. What was really, really difficult about that surgery was the recovery. I was so completely helpless. For about 4 or 5 weeks, the doctor said, you may put 0 weight on that leg. And I know some of you have experienced that before. And you know how completely helpless that makes you, right? You can hardly get up on your own. You can't go get anything on your own because you can't carry it because you have crutches or a walker. You know, if I drop something on the floor, I might as well have dropped it 1,000 kilometers away. I can't get it. I can't get dressed. I can't put my shoes on, socks on. For weeks, I just felt helpless. But my first outing after surgery was to the public library because I needed books to read to pass the time. And I made that trek from the car to the library with my crutches. And as I'm approaching the library, this woman who was a lot older than me sees me coming and stops and holds the door open for me, which was really kind, but really humbling because I should be holding the door open for her. And said, oh, I just feel so helpless and I hate that feeling. I'm guessing I'm not the only one who doesn't like to feel helpless. I'm guessing I'm not the only one who finds it a little bit challenging to humble yourself enough to ask for help when you need it, right? We like to be strong enough to do things on our own. We like to be capable enough. I can handle this. I've got this. Don't need help, right? But there are times when, as I've learned now, I definitely need to ask for help. I need little old ladies to open the door for me sometimes. Right? We need to learn to humble ourselves enough that way. So, the one-word prayer that we're going to be looking at and learning about this morning and hopefully practicing this week is the word help. Right? And we're asking for help not just necessarily from each other. That's not my priority this morning. How do we, and do we dare ask for help from God? Right? So this morning we're going to learn from a hero of the faith, from the story of Moses, right? Maybe you recognize and remember the story of Moses. Moses, the Old Testament leader who led the nation of Israel out of slavery in Egypt, through the desert, and to the promised land. Right? We're going to learn from him. His story is found in Exodus chapter 3 and 4. If you wanted to open your Bibles, we're going to be reading a variety of verses from there. Or you may just listen in, that's fine too. But he was an Old Testament hero who desperately needed help. Right? We don't think about him that way often. We often just think of him as this bold leader, right? He did amazing things. He is a hero of the faith, and that before he did all these amazing things, he did everything he possibly could not to do them. To try and get out of doing them. So in Exodus chapter 3, Moses is out being a shepherd, right? he chose in his life not to have any responsibility, not to take any leadership. He said, I just want to be a shepherd out in the desert. And so he's following his sheep around, doing his shepherd thing, avoiding anything, right? And remember how he sees a bush that's on fire, a burning bush, and he goes over to check it out, and he sees that the bush is on fire, but it's not burning up. And it's pretty amazing. And all of a sudden, he hears God's voice, which we talked about for the last 2 weeks, right? If we're quiet enough to listen, if we're paying attention, then our prayer becomes a conversation with God, and we sense him, and we hear him, and we know his desire for us. Well, Moses hears God's voice out of this bush. And here's what God says to him. Exodus chapter 3, starting at verse 7. God says, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. They've been slaves in Egypt for hundreds of years, right? I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites and Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, has seen the way that the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, Moses, go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Right? There's God's call to Moses. Moses, you're the one. You're going to go to Pharaoh, who's the most powerful man of the most powerful world power of the day. You're going to tell him to let my people go, and then you're going to take them across the desert into the promised land. Right? And think about being Moses. On one hand, what an exciting invitation. Yeah, God, let's do this. But honestly, how absolutely terrifying as well, right? So if you hear last week, you know that we learned that when you hear what God has to say, when he somehow communicates to you, maybe through the word, maybe through the speaking of a trusted friend, maybe through an audible voice even, maybe through your conscience, and God says, I want you to do this. The right answer should be, you remember what our one word was from last week? Your right answer should be, okay. I got my sticker right here, right? Okay, I carried around this week. So you think Moses, hero of the faith, hears this and says, okay. No way. He says just the opposite. He's scared, he's full of doubts, and his first response to God's calling to his life is to make every excuse in the world, every excuse that he can think of why he shouldn't say okay. And honestly, he's not much different than us, is he? We're not much different than him. Because giving excuses of why we shouldn't do difficult things is probably our first response too when we hear God. Because when God calls us, he calls us to God-sized tasks, right? That, like Moses, I'm guessing, will leave you a bit scared, will leave you full of doubts. God calls us often to things, sometimes things that we like to do. Sometimes there's great joy in the path he gives us, and it's easy and joyful. Often he calls us to things maybe we don't really want to do. Maybe he calls us to things that we think we can't do. Like forgive someone who's hurt you. Like rebuild a broken relationship when it'd just be easier just to let it die. Or to set aside your need for justice and to give grace instead. Or maybe he calls you to patiently love a family member who is just really, really hard to love. It's hard when God calls us to serve or to give or to speak when we want to stay silent, or to stay silent when we feel like we need to speak. It's hard when God says, I'm calling you to move, like he did for Abraham last week, right? But I don't know. If you carried your sticky note around last week, maybe you heard God say something to you. Maybe you felt God saying, here, big or small, here's what I want you to do. And maybe it was hard. Maybe your first response is, ooh, I don't know if I can do that. Well, if you did, you're in good company. And it's probably the right thing to feel. Have you ever heard this phrase? God will never give you more than you can handle. I have friends who have this hanging on their wall. It's a beautiful phrase. It's wrong. It's false, okay? God will always give you more than you can handle. Because we can't do anything apart from him. And so if the calling God has given you, love this friend, forgive this wrong, move, give, serve, if your first response is, I can't do that, God says, I know you can't. I know, that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for. It's exactly what Moses realized when he first heard God. God said, go to Pharaoh, lead my people out, bring them to the promised land. And he said, this is more than I can handle. This is way more than I can handle. And so Moses begins to make excuses with God. We're going to look at Moses' excuses. He gives 5 of them. We're going to look at his excuses this morning because they're often the same excuses we give to God when we don't want to do what he's called us to do. We're also going to look at God's 5 responses to Moses' excuses, because they're often the responses God will give to us as well. And so we need to know them. We should hear them. Because every excuse we give, every excuse that comes to mind is really a cry for help. It's an honest admission before God saying, I need your help. So let's look at these. Moses' first excuse comes right away in verse 11. God just said, I'm sending you, now go. And Moses says in verse 11, who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Who am I? God, you know who I am, right? You know that this is way too big for me. This is way too much. Basically, Moses' first excuse is, I can't do this. I can't do it. I'm just little old me. I don't do confronting Pharaoh. I don't do leading nations. I don't do crossing deserts. God, this is too big. This is too hard. I can't do it. My guess is whenever you hear God say something to you, whenever you hear God's calling in your life, that's going to be your first response. God, I can't do it. I can't do it. It's too far out of my comfort zone. It's too far beyond my ability. God, do you know who I am? Do you know all my weaknesses? Do you know all my faults? If you do, you know I can't do it. And you know, God listens to Moses. He listens to you when you say that too. Your first response, I can't do this. And he says to Moses in verse 12, his first words are to him, you know what? I'll be with you. I'll be with you every step along the way. I know you can't do it. I know. I get it. I'm going to do it with you. And God promises, in that promise, I'll be with you. God brings his authority with you. God brings his power with you. God brings all of his wisdom there with you. He says, I'll be with you and I'll bring everything that you need to get this done. Everything. And that promise should be more than enough for Moses to say, great, I got God with me, let's go. Should be more than enough for me to say, if God is with me, great, let's go. should be more than enough for you. I got God with me. Let's go. But do we truly live and believe in God's presence in our lives day by day? Do we truly believe that he brings his power into us to be released through us to accomplish his will in us? Do we believe in that power enough to actually act? To actually say, okay, and do it. Moses didn't. And he hears this promise from God. I know you can't, but I'll be with you. And his response isn't, okay, let's go. His response is to bring excuse number 2. Okay, if that excuse didn't work, let's try this one. He says in verse 13, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? In our culture, those words don't get to the heart of his excuse there. In that culture, there's power in a name. Right? When you know somebody's name, you have power over them. And when you know the name of your God, when God gives you his name, there's power there. And Moses says, what if I go and they don't recognize your name? What he's really saying is, God, I'm not sure you can do this. I'm not sure, I don't truly believe that you have all the power to be able to do this. What if you don't? And you know what? Moses' fears are right on. If you read this story on in chapter 5, he goes to the people of Israel, and he goes to Pharaoh, and he says, God, the Lord sent me, Yahweh. And in verse 5, chapter 5, Pharaoh says, who's he? Who's he that I should let Israel go? I don't know him. I'm not going to let him go. In other words, I don't believe your God has that kind of power. So if you hear God's promise to be present with all of his power and you still doubt it, you're in good company. You're standing right where Moses was standing. Right? But God's response to Moses' doubts, God's response to your doubts, and my doubts, is bold. Right? The whole rest of chapter 3, I'm not going to read it. You may read it later. It's a great story to read. The whole rest of chapter 3, God responds to his Moses' doubt. God, I'm not sure you can do this. And he goes step by step and he says, Moses, here's what I'm going to do. And he goes, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, and this is going to happen. And in the end, you're going to get out of here, and you're going to be free, and you're going to be the leader, and we're going to do this together. Right? God says to him, God lays out all the details and says, I will do this. That's the assurance. I can do this, and I will do this. Right? All you need to do, Moses, is say, okay, and step in faith, and I'll carry us through. I've got that power, and I've got that desire. All right. So Moses says, all right, okay, let's do this, right? Not yet. He still doesn't want to do this. He still isn't convinced. So excuse number 3 comes in chapter 4, verse 1. He responds to that and says, okay, what if they don't believe me? What if they don't listen to me? And what if they say, the Lord did not appear to you? Moses is saying to God, I am certain that if I take this step, if I say okay and do this, I'm going to fail. Okay? I can't do this. I'm going to fail. This isn't going to work. Even teaming up with God himself is not enough for Moses to believe that he can do it. And Moses says, even if I do what you say, God, this won't work. Pharaoh won't listen to me. The people of Israel won't listen to me. I know I'll fail. And God, if I were God, I think right now I'd say, fine, Moses, enough. I'll find somebody else. I give up. Maybe you're not the guy I thought you were. God doesn't give up. Instead, what he does for Moses, who's convinced that he'll fail, he says, let me show you the kind of power that I'm going to give you. Right? So God shares his power with Moses. You can read about it in chapter 4. He says, Moses, this walking staff that you take, throw it on the ground. So Moses throws his walking staff on the ground and it turns into a snake. And he says, yeah, I'm sure Moses jumps back a little bit. Who likes snakes, right? He says, go, pick it up by the tail. Picks it up by the tail and it turns back into a walking stick. See, that's the kind of power I have, Moses, and the power I'm giving you. You're the one that threw that down. Moses, take your hand and put it inside the folds of your cloak. And he does. Says, now pull it out, and he's got leprosy, one of the most feared diseases of that day. Now he's really scared, right? And God says, no. Put it back in and pull it back out, and he's healed again. You think you're going to fail? Look at all the power that I'm going to give you. This is just a taste of what we're going to do together. Right? We got this together, Moses. Again, that should be more than enough for Moses to say, great, let's go. And he still isn't convinced. He still doesn't want to do it. And so he gives his next excuse. Number 4 is one that's very familiar. Very familiar. Chapter 4, verse 10. Moses says to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I love how he says, I'm sorry to begin. He realizes, I'm on excuse number 4. Sorry, God. I got one more here. Sorry. Pardon your servant, Lord. I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you've spoken to me. I'm slow of speech and tongue. We know that Moses probably stuttered some. And so he looked at his own ability and he said, you know what? I'm not your best choice. I can think of a dozen other people who'd be better at this than me, God. So why don't you go find one of them? I'm not the best choice. This is a talking task. God, don't you realize I'm going to talk to the people, talk to Pharaoh, and I stutter. Find somebody who doesn't stutter. That'd be a much better choice. God doesn't deny, interesting, God does not deny that Moses isn't the best choice. But he also doesn't let Moses off the hook. Here's his response, verses 11 and 12 of chapter 4. The Lord responds to him by saying, who gave you your mouth? Who makes people either deaf or mute? Who gives them sight? Who makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? In other words, I know everything about you, Moses. I know how you talk. Verse 12, now go. Go, and I will help you speak, and I will give you the words that you need to say. Right? He doesn't say, Moses, you are the best choice. Instead, he says, you know what? You are my choice. You are my choice. And if Moses is God's choice, that makes him the best choice. Because God never calls us, you, me. He never calls us. He never uses us because we have such great abilities, because we are so capable. He chooses us because we are a part of his plan, and he knows that he can use us and will use us. And so if you heard God say something to you this past week, or whenever you do hear a conviction from God to say, do this, go here, do that, know that God chose you for this task, and that's not a mistake. Because if you are God's chosen person, then you are the right person. You are the right one. Moses is out of excuses. But he still doesn't want to do it. So he takes one more shot. One more shot at getting out of this. Exodus 4:13. Moses says, pardon your servant, Lord. I'm doubly sorry. Pardon your servant. Please send someone else. Isn't that a great line? God, I'm out of excuses. I have no other reasons to say. I'll just be honest and tell you, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do this. Just send someone else. boy, it's so honest. And it's so familiar. I know it's familiar for me. I don't know if it is for you. There are times when God has said, here's what I want you to do. And my first, I skip all the excuses and I just go right to, I really don't want to. I really don't want to. I hear you, God. Yes, I hear you. But I'm choosing not to do it. And God replies one more time to Moses. He says, I know you don't want to do it. I hear you. I've heard all your excuses, and I know your heart. I know you don't want to do this. Know this, though. I will help you. I will help you do this. And we will do this together. That's God's final answer. Right? I'll help you, and we'll do it together. It's such a gift to know that God never sends us out on our own. He never says, here's what I want you to do. Now go do it and report to me back later. No. He never sends us on our own. We always go with His presence, with His power, with His Holy Spirit within us. Right? And in His grace and by His power, He gives us all the help we need to begin to take that first step of this huge God-sized task that we think is way too big for us. He gives us the ability to take the first step in handling whatever God-sized challenge is sitting before us. He says, I'll walk with you. Let's do this together. When you hear God, and instead of saying, okay, excuses come to mind. Excuses flood to your heart and maybe back to God. Recognize them for what they are. They are your request for help. God, here's where I need your help. God, here's where I need your help. And so that's our one-word prayer for this week. It's the word help. Help. It's one of the most humbling and courageous prayers that you can ever pray. It is so humbling because it's admitting to God and admitting to whoever else is in this conversation with you that you can't do it. That you don't have enough. That you aren't big enough, you aren't strong enough, you aren't brave enough. It's humbling to ask God for help. But it's also so very courageous. Because asking for that help is a step of trusting God. Trusting God's presence in your life. Trusting God's power in your life. Trusting Him that He will provide. And trusting Him enough that after you say help, He gets you to a point where you can say, okay. Okay. So remember what we're learning about through this whole series about prayer. We're learning it's a conversation. We're learning to speak to God honestly and to listen to God. And so when you listen to God, He will invite you into His kingdom purposes. He will give you adventures and tasks and opportunities set right before you. Kingdom opportunities, kingdom adventures, right? And let's be honest, your first response maybe won't be okay. Your first response might be excuses of why you should say no. Because few of us are naturally this bold to just say, okay. Some of us are. Some of us aren't. When the excuses come, don't be ashamed. You should expect them. You should expect excuses to come. Just don't accept them. Expect them, but don't accept them. Because God doesn't just accept them. You can give God every excuse you want, and He's going to say, I'm not giving up on you. I'm not letting you off the hook quite yet. He'll give you Himself. So this week, I want you to post the word help. Because I just spelled it wrong. I want you to post the word help somewhere where you will see it. On your computer screen, on your dashboard of your car, on the mirror in your bathroom, somewhere where you will see it again and again and again. And when you hear God's direction in your life, if you're listening to God, when you hear him lead you towards something big or something small, it can be something just to be done in that day. When you feel convicted, notice the excuses that come to mind. I don't have time for that. I'm too busy for that. I'm not the one who should do that. If I just ignore it, it might just go away. I don't know what excuses will come to mind. Notice them. And recognize those excuses as your request for help. God, help me make the time. God, give me courage to have that conversation. God, would you help me to take just one step? Recognize every excuse as a request for help. What help and assurance do you need from God? Do you believe he can give it? Do you believe he will give it? Do you believe God can do it? Do you believe he'll use you? What do you believe about God's promises and his presence and his power in your life? So that every excuse help you hear his voice speaking to you as he did to Moses. And he'll say to you, trust me. I know this is hard. I know you're scared. I know you don't think you can do this. Trust me. And I'll help you. And let's do this together. Would you pray with me?